Thank you for listening in to another episode of the ChaiVersations podcast, produced and recorded by Sabir Ali and Abrar Rahman. To learn more about the organization behind the ChaiVersations podcast, the Mason Muslim Affairs Council, please visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where we are MMAC.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the ChaiVersations podcast by MMAC. I'm hosting today with my brother Sabir. He's also in MMAC. And our guest today is somebody who's very, very special and near and dear to my heart. He's my teacher, he's my mentor, and I'm sure, Sabir, he's impacted your life really profoundly as well. So, would you want to introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Omar Popal, and I don't know what impact I have on anyone's life. But wait, what is this called? Is this called ChaiVersations?
ChaiVersations. No one has chai today, but we just.
I'm the only one with something chai-like.
As long as our speaker has tried, then I think we're good to go.
I made myself coffee in a Gryffindor mug. I don't want anyone after this to be like, oh, innovator.
Slytherin over here.
It's too much magic in Harry Potter.
Gryffindor, man.
The funny part was when we were doing this in Ramadan and it was called ChaiVersations. So that was kind of
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Omar Popal, and I also live in the Virginia, Fairfax area, frequent George Mason, where I believe this podcast is part of a club.
Yeah.
Yes, well, it's part of MMAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, and we work on, humanitarian political events. And recently we just started getting into podcasts, and we want to talk more about, just social issues that the Muslim diaspora face, and just kind of get an understanding of individual speakers, and just learn from each other, and try to find out, understand what's going on around in the world these days, and what's happening to our lives and society.
I'm happy you guys were gracious enough to ask me to come on. And so basically I would say that I spent the last decade studying Islamic studies in various places around the world, including Virginia itself and Yemen and Turkey. And I'm also a graduate of Dar al-Qasim, which is an institute in Chicago, run by Sheikh Amin Khawadia, some wonderful teachers out there as well. And upon returning, we founded a small institute here in Virginia called Tanweer Institute, where we hope to kind of spread prophetic teachings, but also prophetic lifestyle, and just be a community hub for those who want to learn, those who want to just talk, those who want to a shoulder to lean on, and try and serve the community to the best of our ability. And again, thank you all for having me.
It's our pleasure, Ustad. And one of the things we wanted to talk to you today, Ustad, is about now that we're in quarantine, things have changed drastically for everybody. And for some people, it's really extreme. They're experiencing emotional, financial crises. For others like us, like students like ourselves, we just don't have that option of, we're used to working, we're used to hustle, right? We're used to working towards a goal and contributing. And when we don't have that, there's a sense of lacking of purpose in our lives. And I just want to hear what you think is really lacking, and how we can reconcile this with our faith and use our faith to better our situation, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Yeah, that's something that I think has been on all of our minds. I mean, if you are a parent, if you are a student, if you are someone who works in corporate America or just any other job, the second quarantine hit, we all found ourselves paused of our regular routines, right? And our routines are what made us feel, quote unquote, productive, right? So the second our routines had to now undergo change, and there's only a few people who really didn't have to undergo change, we found ourselves with this question of, well, what do I do? And a lot of us found ourselves lacking. We found ourselves stopping certain things that we used to do, maybe even adding on certain actions that we never did, right? So the first question, I think, to clarify things is, what made us productive in the first place, right? What made us productive in the first place? And one thing I noticed though, before we even answer that question, just from talking to friends and students, if you were unproductive or like you said, didn't really have any goals, right? Before quarantine hit, before COVID hit, you were even more unproductive and even more goal-less during quarantine. And if you were someone who was very productive, right, and very kind of like in the pursuit of something, pursuit of goals, right, objectives, if you were sincere in that, quarantine shouldn't have stopped you, right? Quarantine shouldn't have stunned you unless it was something that literally you physically couldn't do because of quarantine, right? So going back to what makes us productive, I think our faith definitely helps us in that question, right? Our faith is one of those, I mean, due to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We find different definitions of productivity, but they all fall under a higher objective, or rather we say, right, the highest objective, right? And the highest objective that we have is spending this life in a manner that is pleasing to the one who created life itself, and spending this life trying our best to do two things, two major things, and that's getting to know our creator and serving the creation, right? Quarantine shouldn't stop either of those two, right? And for anyone who was ignorant of these two things and was just pursuing that degree or just pursuing that paycheck or that job, right, solely for that reason, yeah, they're definitely going to find an emptiness, right? They're definitely going to find an emptiness. But so I guess that's my kind of take on productivity. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think since the beginning of the quarantine, I think there was generally like a feeling that, you know, our schedules had kind of been altered, and, you know, we just find ways where, you know, there's a void in our day, you know, because there's a lot more time for us to just kind of sit around or find other things to do. And I think personally for me, that void was what kind of pushed me into an area of, you know, laziness and finding, you know, just moments along the day where I just didn't do much. So like, how would you say that, is there an importance of scheduling or an importance of, you know, dedicating your day into, you know, certain aspects in Islam or in the Prophetic
tradition? You know, Sheikh Abdurrahman Saqaf, rahimahullah, one of the early, very early scholars of South Yemen, and a very special man. You know, he has this one wonderful saying, it's one-liners, kind of like mic drop liners. And he says, "Man laysa lahu wird fahuwa qird." And you could roughly understand that is, you know, the one who doesn't have like a sound schedule, you know, a sound routine, then they're like an ape. They're like a monkey. You know, they swing over there or they swing over there, and they just find themselves like rolling on the floor, you know, because they don't have a sound schedule. So absolutely, when quarantine hit early on, I think it was natural for everyone to pause and maybe feel some laziness, feel some confusion, right? But we're only allowed so much of that. I mean, how long can we feel bad for ourselves? You know? So it's really at that point, and even still now, that we just have to remind ourselves, okay, listen, I, Omar Popal, I thrive on routine. I have to make myself a routine, even if it's not the same thing, right? Even if it's not, you know, what I was doing before and I loved it and it was so great and I had everything and oh, boo-hoo, you know, I can't do this anymore. it's like, literally I was talking to some students and they're like, I was like, well, how you're still taking classes? How are the studies? And they're like, oh, I don't really read too much anymore because I can't go to the coffee shop. And I was like, so your reading is contingent on the coffee shop? Like that's how weak we are as a people? So in the beginning, it was absolutely natural to feel that sense of sadness, to feel that sense of confusion. And I don't think any of us should feel bad about that,
I feel like that goes hand with like a sense of comfortness because there's some people who would say that they felt more comfortable studying in certain areas or doing things that they did before quarantine. Now they have this period of readjusting and finding ways to start their day in a different approach than what they did because some people they'd say that it's more beneficial for me to study at a coffee shop or study on campus rather than studying at home. And I think that if it allowed us to find ways, or we had to adjust and adapt to our situations and find ways to just start the day on a different mindset than what we were initially used to.
Exactly. And I guarantee you, once you build this quarantine routine and you get used to it, you're gonna start thriving in it. And once you start thriving in it, and then quarantine goes away, inshallah, you're gonna be like, oh, I miss my quarantine routine. It was so nice, So we have to understand. I feel like sometimes we doubt ourselves. Human beings are very flexible. Allah created us as flexible creatures. We can adapt to change. We might not like it. It will be tough, but we can definitely adapt. Right? I mean, if you think about a majority of us, right, our parents came here from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, wherever they came from, a lot of Palestinians and Yemenis. Our parents adapted. They didn't like it at first, but they adapted. So we need to, in times of difficulty and uncomfort, that's when we roll our sleeves up. Because that's the test, right? Yeah. Otherwise, this world would just be called Jannah. It wouldn't be called Dunya.
Yeah. Right? One of the biggest things, Ustad, that I gained from that initial reflection that you mentioned, and this actually takes me back to something that you told me when we were in a class. I think it was the Arabic class. Is you were saying that what's out there that I can't find over here within myself. It's as if these goals that we have of finishing our university degree, it's as if that goal is a goal within in and of itself, when it's actually, just like you mentioned, just a sub goal of the larger goal that is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the question is, what's changed? Because our ultimate goal is the same in both scenarios, in quarantine, out quarantine. The context is different. The way we approach it is different. Obviously, like you and Sabir mentioned so well, the scheduling is different. But it also brings to light one thing that we're often in this escapist mentality where we're trying to escape our own flaws and our faults by going to that coffee shop to study, whereas I could just as well easily study at home, so that I can use that as an excuse to explain my shortcomings.
Subhanallah. Two things, and that's that last point you made there about being escapist. That's really important, because it's a trick. It's a trick of not only shaitan, but it's a trick of the ego, which every single one of us has, Muslim or not Muslim. But before we talk about that, I also want to mention one more thing about productivity, right? And that is, when we were all on our pre-quarantine routines, okay, what we did, we saw as, okay, this is productive. This is productivity. And then when we had to leave those things, right, we were like, oh man, like I'm not productive anymore. But as a Muslim, right, our scope of productivity is very vast. Spending time with your parents is productivity. Spending time with your siblings is productivity. spending time in silence and solitude is productivity. Just because you don't see it as cash, right? You know, if anyone knows the Tablighi Jamaat, right? Our brothers in the Tablighi Jamaat, they have this term called cash. And basically they say that, you know, who's going to go with us for a 3-day da'wah trip? Cash. And cash means like you straight up just go. You don't even go home and get your bag. You just go. You just go right then and there. So we're so used to like, you know, cash outcomes, right? Fast results. And we don't realize that, as the scholars say, how many a times does an hour of reflection outweigh the value of 1,000 years of worship? I mean, these aren't like like, you know, goofy statements. Like there's value behind them. And that's one thing I think we need to realize while we're in this state, that, you know what? Wow, the things that I'm now doing, they actually are productive. They're just not how I used to see productivity. I have to put on a different lens now. What was that, Sabir?
And I think it goes hand in hand with reward systems. Like I think human beings inherently have, you know, an idea that, you know, they want instant reward or instant gratification for the work that they put in. And, you know, like our definition of productivity has clearly, you know, had to evolve considering quarantine and whatnot. And I feel like this has been a test of patience, in the sense that our reward, or like our concept of reward, or to ourselves or from our, or, you know, engagement with society, isn't the same. You know, we just have a different approach, and we have to find ways where, you know, our situations may not change for the long term, but we just need to find ways to, you know, reconcile with that, and realize that, you know, there's a worldly reward, and there's also, you know, the reward of the nafs, which I think is what we're trying to accomplish by changing our, you know, outlook on productivity during a quarantine.
Exactly. No, exactly. And again, there's a lot to be said about, you know, productivity, and there's a really good book. Forgot the name, Sheikh Ismail something. I forgot his last name right now. You can look it up on Amazon. It's called La ilaha illallah. I'm gonna text you it. Before the end of this podcast, I'm gonna mention it. It's like 100-something tips on being the productive Muslim. And it's actually really well done. He spent a lot of time reading like self-help books and productivity books from some of the biggest like business moguls and whatnot. And he, in light of the Quran and Sunnah. So I think that's a really good book, and people should check that out if they're stuck.
In light of that, what I find is helpful is adhkar. You know, certain days that, you know, Allah kind of essentially created a schedule for you in the form of adhkar, and finding, you know, moments in the day where we can kind of just make dua, or find specific incidences where, you know, that this is the perfect time for this, or this is the perfect time to engage in this. And I feel like that's definitely helped me during Ramadan, and finding, you know, balance throughout the day. Is there like any other, like, you know, methods of prophetic methods that we could adapt to find ways where we can grasp the situation?
So you cut off on that last part. Is there any other what?
Prophetic traditions, or you know, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that helped him kind of change his method of productivity, or change methods of scheduling, or you know, going throughout the day.
I mean, I think you're mentioning of adhkar, right, is so important, because, you know, the second quarantine hit and you can no longer, you know, physically go to a class, right, or like a Islamic class. You can't go and sit with good people and good friends and good companionship, right? It's really that daily remembrance that helped those who grabbed onto it. And that's something we should have all the time, right? But in quarantine, you really felt the solace that dhikr gave, that remembrance of God gave and gives currently. Right? But again, just to clarify this point, there are two things, right? There are two things. There is the need for us to build a routine in quarantine, and for us to see that we can still be very productive just using a different method. That's one. And then the second thing is what you're talking about right now is, if we're feeling that we miss the masajid, we miss classes, we miss hanging out with good friends, right? That's where, okay, I need to start learning, right, how to worship God, feel my faith, feel that spiritual high on my own, right? And obviously the companions, I mean, their best moments was when they're with the Prophet ﷺ, right? But you didn't see them not do, right, good actions and remembrance when they left his presence, right? Their faith wasn't contingent on him and wasn't contingent on the masjid and wasn't even contingent on each other, right? It was on yourself, and that just takes what's called himma. And I think we need to have conversations about himma, like spiritual courage. One of the biggest sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ is that he was a courageous person, right? He never shied away from a difficulty. And going back to our brother Abrar's point about escapism, right? A lot of us are shying away from the errors that we see in ourselves now that we're alone. And what do? We either go and binge Netflix, right? We go and, literally just like waste our time playing Candy Crush on our phones, okay? I don't know how many hours can pass and you realize, oh my God, I'm still playing Candy Crush, right? We go and, whatever, oh goodness, video games, right? And a big impetus for us doing that is not because, I mean, how many times have you watched something on Netflix and you literally were sitting there and like, I don't want to watch this. Like, this is dumb. But the reason you're doing that is because you're escaping something that you should be doing. You're scared to take the courage and build that new routine. You're scared to take that courage and actually develop a better relationship with your siblings or parents by sitting with them. You're scared to face your own mistakes and actually fix them, maybe your own addictions, right? So what we need to focus on is why? Why am I scared? One of the signs, and I believe Sayyidina Hassan al-Basri, who's the best of the generation after the companions, he said one of the signs that God loves a person is he allows them to focus on their own mistakes and not others. So taking that courageous step, in bettering ourselves and our relationships and our routines, is one of those means to get divine love. So escapism is really, it's a trick of the devil, man. It's a trick. And the thing is, I really feel like we all know it. We all know it. We just don't want to talk about it because we're embarrassed.
Yeah, I think it's like in our nafs, we just find, different things that we feel discontent with, and we just kind of brush it aside, or we say, we don't need to address it, and just focus on other things that, you find easier, or you find, something that you're just used to. It's definitely the fear of what's going to happen if it doesn't work out, or what's going to happen if, the result isn't the same. And I think, it just people are afraid to take the initiative is what's stopping people, in my opinion.
And I think one thing, Sabir, that you and both Ustad alluded to is the fact that productivity for a Muslim is anything that'll bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ustad, the example that you mentioned about our families are a big test for us and a big blessing for us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're getting this opportunity to spend so much extra time with our siblings, with our parents, which we don't get when we're busy driving to school, going from class to class, right? And we can find so many blessings, so many good deeds that we can do. For example, you can build the habit of serving your parents in some way. Maybe somebody's parents are in a lot of pain. They have a lot of physical pain. So you massage their legs, that you do something that serves them. Yeah. Or you tell your mother she's beautiful every day. Just some basic habits that could take you to Jannah, possibly, inshallah. And the other pockets of time, like Sabir mentioned about dhikr, it's so important right now when we have all this time that we spend more of it in worship. For example, when we're in school, we don't get too much time to pray all our sunnahs, right? But right now, we can pray all 12 rakahs. And if we pray more, then we can expect more from our prayer. We can become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that way.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that same point where we have to take accountability for our own schedules, for our own actions. And we can't spend time mindlessly binging. And I'm guilty of this. I've binged just a few days back, right after Ramadan, even during Ramadan. So, and that brings me to another big thing that's actually social media. So we don't talk about this enough because I often look at social media as a drug that everybody is consuming. So it's hard to tell who's drunk when everybody's drunk, right?
Yeah.
So, and some people may think that's an extreme opinion, but deep down inside, we all know that there's no good reason to spend 2 hours a day on social media. And 2 hours is a good day, mind you. So yeah, and I feel like a lot of diseases of the heart come along with that sort of activity. It over time, it can deaden your heart. It can make you incapable of feeling things. And I just want to hear your thoughts on that, Ustad.
Yeah, man. Subhanallah. Let's just rip the bandage off. Social media, right, was created with certain intentions in mind. And we all have to understand that. You know, it was created to be a distraction. You know? And I don't want right now to talk about the good of it, because we all know the good, right? It's like every time you tell someone, get off Instagram, but I'm looking at one of those hadith pictures, right? Get off Twitter. No, but I'm reading an Islamic debate, you know? It's like, oh, mashallah, yani, the 1 minute you spent reading some Islamic comment equals, you know, gives you permission that you can spend 2 hours looking at pictures of God knows what, you know, reading comments of God knows what, being jealous of who knows who, you know. So when we talk about, you know, the question is, does social media truly affect us? You know, why are the Muslims hating on social media? It's just something we do. You know, you made marijuana haram, you make alcohol haram, now you're gonna make social media haram. Like, no, we're not making anything haram. But we need to understand that Allah has created us, right, as mu'athar creatures. What does that mean? What does mu'athar mean? We're affected by everything, right? We're not stones, we're clay, right? We're not stones. And we are what we eat, we are what we see, we are what we hear, and we definitely are what we believe in. All right, now let me give you some stories about that, okay? Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab said, he said, beware of meat, beware of red meat, because it has the drunkenness of wine. Now, why would he say that? Right? Meaning what? Meat can cause you to be lethargic. It can cause you to be sleepy. How many times have you eaten a steak, right? Or like, I don't know, meat biryani, and afterward you were just like, ooh, you were out of it, you know? Yeah. Because it affects you. Okay, that's eating, right? Sayyidina Imam al-Shafi'i, he writes a whole poem, and I'm sure everyone knows this poem, but we'll repeat it again, right? One day, Imam al-Shafi'i, his memory was so good, right? That he would take a book and he would have to put one hand on this side if he was reading this side, because he would end up memorizing the side he read. That's how gifted he was in his memory. One day he's walking in the marketplace and he sees, right, something that's impermissible for him to see. He just glances upon it, okay? He goes back to his book that night, can't memorize nothing. So he goes to one of the greatest muhaddithin and scholars of that time, Waqi', and he writes the poem. He says, Shakotu ila Waqi'. I went to my teacher Waqi' complaining. سوء حفظي, about the weakness of my memory, right? فأرشدني بترك المعاصي, and he told me you have to leave sin, right? فإن علما نور, because knowledge is light, لا يعطي العاصي, it's not given to a sinner. But why did all this start? He looked at something he shouldn't have looked at. Okay, that's looking. What about the hadith, right? That says that the angels cover the gatherings in which people remember Allah, right? And the angels go back to Allah, right? And they inform Allah of this gathering. And of course, Allah already knows, right? And Allah says, what do they want? And they say they want Jannah, and they want protection from the fire, and they want forgiveness. And Allah says it's given, okay? And they said, Ya Allah, there was a person who's not of the gathering, but he kind of just like walked by the gathering and saw them. And Allah said he's forgiven too. Right? So what does that mean? It means that we're affected in this realm and in the next realm by everything that we do. Which is why in Ramadan, what do you hear about all the time? What do you read about? Taqwa, 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 right? Taqwa is just being aware that everything affects you. Now, go to social media, right? Let's flip it. Let's say you don't use social media much, right? But you put a picture there of the new car you bought. Okay? There's no like filter that only allows clean-hearted people to see that new car you bought. Right? Someone's gonna look at that picture, it might have some jealousy. And we're not saying, astaghfirullah, you committed a sin because you were the reason that jealousy went in that person's heart. No, right? But now someone has jealousy in their heart, and they're looking at your car with jealousy, right? And the Prophet said, "Al-ainu haq." The eye, the eye is truth, meaning the evil eye is true, right? You put the food you eat on social media, people are looking at it. People, I know this because this Ramadan, people who cannot afford the food that you are eating, who never even thought they could taste the food you're eating, are looking at the food you're eating. And if you flip it around to, okay, you're not uploading anything, you're just looking. I mean, what are you doing though?
Yeah.
You want to talk about productivity? What on earth makes that productive? But Sheikh so-and-so posted this and I love his post. It's like, okay, go on YouTube. And to be honest with you guys, for Tanweer, I mentioned this a couple months ago, they had me download the Instagram app to upload things. Oh, what a horrible, horrible application. I mean, there's a lot of haram on there, man, without even looking for it. So that's just my 2 cents. I know you all know this stuff, but I think we need to be very weary of yeah.
I think we tend to find ourselves in situations where we try to desensitize it or try to justify it. Because I remember in the beginning of Ramadan, I was guilty of this myself. I said, I'm going to stay off of Twitter. I'll just, initially just don't use Twitter, try to find other mediums. And then later on, I was like, you know what, why don't I make a new Twitter just for Islamic posts, and I'll listen to Islamic posts here and there. And then I fell back into, talking to my friends on Twitter, seeing what they're tweeting, and I found myself back in the same cycle. So I feel as if, there is that situation where, you desensitize yourself and you find ways where your body's justifying it. There was a saying, not all shaitans are locked up, and your nuts is still around you. Your nuts is still, saying, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. Maybe there's a little free, area here to dabble on this. I think ourselves, we are our biggest test. We're our biggest enemies when it comes to fulfilling our desires or chasing a desire.
Like I said, for how long are we gonna be content by being spiritually weak? Okay, no one is content with poverty. You see people who go through poverty, they become hustlers, right? They become hustlers and they make it. Very few people are like, oh yeah, I'm poor, woohoo, right? You see people who, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, um, they're like physically weak, you know? They're not just like, oh yeah, I'm a weak person. They get upset. Anyone calls them out for being weak, and they go to the gym, right? But when it comes to our faith and spirituality, right? And I speak to myself first. Until how long? Until we tell ourselves, listen, for God's sake, stop being a punk, stop being weak, you know? And the second we do that, we will find immense goodness in all facets of our life. Guaranteed. And just a quick comment, by the way, Sabir, about shaitan in Ramadan. It's a misunderstanding. The devils that are locked in Ramadan, they're called the marada. They're a type of devil. There are other shayateen that are still on the loose in Ramadan, according to the majority opinion.
So just like the major ones that one fucked up and
Yeah,
is still shaking.
but
So
they're definitely back now.
Oh yeah.
one thing that Ustad, you've stressed really a lot in your classes before, and that's coming back to me right now, is the senses, our sight, our tongue, all these things are a sort of a gateway to the heart. So everything that we use it for, it affects us in some way. And we know this to some degree when we're living life. For example, we're Sabir and I, we try to control our companionship. We try to hang out with good people, right?
Yeah.
And this is true for everybody. But for some reason, when it comes to social media, Ustad, that's out the window. And it's almost as if this virtual environment does not affect us in any way, shape, or form. It's as if anything we see there will not come back to haunt us in our prayer. And I feel like bashing social media is one end of it, but on the other end, we have to really understand what it is that social media offers. And I have a really strong perspective on this for a reason. It's because I was the biggest social media addict. So I was in social media all day, all night at one point of my life.
You have a lot of followers?
Yeah, I was really into music, posting content every now and then, and I was just and one day I woke up and I hated my life because I put up this facade of a person that wasn't really me. And of course, many people don't go to that length. Some are, in the middle, some are less. But one thing I find that's consistent across everybody is that social media gives everybody a sense of validation. So it appeals to a very basic need of being heard, of being recognized and appreciated by others. And you'll see when you go to social media, Assad, you put up a story and somebody watches that story. They're long gone. They've watched 50 other stories after that. But you see their name, you see that picture, and you feel like they're still watching it. And it's as if you're the center of the universe. And for people who are more propagating deen, it haunts them in other ways too. It makes them feel like the world needs them online. As funny as that sounds. And there are other types of people who just, like you mentioned, just scroll on social media, watch everybody else's content. But that's blatantly obvious why that's not the best use of anybody's time. So it's just that. So I feel like it's a gateway to other diseases of the heart, such as arrogance, because it certainly made me very arrogant. Now looking back, and I couldn't see any of this until I discarded it. I went for 3, 4, 5 months without using it, except really, really rarely. And now coming back to it, it's like a switch. I can open it for 5 minutes and I can go 5 weeks without checking it again. Alhamdulillah, I feel like that's a big breakthrough I've made in my life that I want others to be able to make, because I feel like many people feel trapped, almost enslaved by this device. And yeah.
I have a question for both of you. What do you think is the last disease to leave the heart, to leave the nafs?
That's the ego.
So arrogance. What do you, Abrar?
I agree with him. Yeah.
So Ghazali says that the most subtle disease of the heart and the last to leave, because it's so hidden, is love of being known. It's called hubb al-jah. It's the love of being known. And like Abrar said, the reason why so many people are on these platforms is they just want to be known. You know, they're lonely. And modernity, you know, it's best, and I don't mean this in a good way, I'm just saying, if you look at the results of modernity, the most clear result is that it has individualized every single human being, right? We don't feel part of a structure. We don't feel part of our families. We don't, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here. I'm just, these are the results of modernity. And because we feel that loneliness, we don't feel known, we don't feel appreciated, quote unquote, we turn to social media, but that leads to fakeness, like Abrar said. And
would you say that goes hand in hand with arrogance, though? Just the need
no,
of being recognized or recognition.
yeah, I mean, they're all somewhat connected, because it's like, you know, if you feel that you're deserving of being known, that's a little bit, that's arrogance right there,
Mm-hmm.
right? But just this notion that every nafs, every ego, every hawa, it comes with certain diseases, and as we live in this world, our test is to remove them, right? The final one is that one of being known, and social media makes that so hard to go away, so hard to go away, you know. um,
There's a
so
saying, clout is a disease. Just getting attention constantly.
yeah,
It definitely changes a person where you just feel as if you can't be yourself or you can't stand up for what you want to do or what you believe is right, and you just feel like I have to satisfy the people that are looking at me, the people that are trying to get attention from me, and you just kind of you're enslaved to just ideas and thoughts. What do they think of me? Or what do they
culture,
perceive in me? And
culture.
culture, yes.
It's all about the culture. Why are you doing this? The
Yeah.
culture. Why are you dressed like this? The culture. What culture? Whose culture?
I don't
You
know.
know, Sheikh Hamza said something a while back, and I really love it. You know, if you don't philosophize, someone's gonna philosophize for you.
Hmm.
And by the way, you know, mashallah, you all are in college, right? I'm a little older than you all. Biggest issue we have is the 10-year-olds that are on this thing. You know,
Oh
I'm just,
yeah.
if we're gonna take this to another level, you know, and at the very least, we can see ourselves as role models for the next generation, right? Oh my God, can you imagine you at 8 years old, instead of watching SpongeBob, okay, you are literally watching another human being's life on a vlog, right? And then all you want to do is be them. One of my far relatives, dude's like 7 years old, walking around with the gold chain. Like, what are you doing walking around with a gold chain? Like, oh, so and so YouTuber does it. I'm like, and he goes, I want to be like them. You know, um, so there are, you know, Allah help us. Allah help us. And again, there are some good usages of social media. You know, we're already the rabbit hole. Majority of people are already down it. You know, so going cold turkey like Abrar is an option. You know, but definitely setting limits on yourself. You know, blocking people who you should not be following, straight up blocking them, and then you know, the best thing we can all do to help ourselves right now is if Allah has given you a good friend or a good group of friends, you have to be real with each other and be like, listen, I need you to help me. You know, I'm looking at such and such on social media. I shouldn't be. Can you just check up on me? And I'm be truthful with you. I'm gonna be truthful with you. You know, if I use social media for 5 hours in one day, I'm gonna tell you, and we help each other. You know, we help each other. Um,
I think
and yeah,
that's a good takeaway for just being in quarantine and being able to stay connected with your peers. Find ways where you can build up each other. Find ways where you can help each other overcome the struggles or whatever you witness since quarantine started. Whether it's social media, whether it's being lazy, and I think that even though we're all separated, I
yeah,
think the companionship is really developed off of how you're looking after your brother, or how you're looking after your sister, and you know, things
Mhm.
that you kind of develop in the community.
One thing that helped me quit Ustad, I want to share, sorry for interrupting you,
No, no, it's all
but
good.
is that first I had to understand just how bad it was for my heart. Because one thing I found is that there was no purity left in my intention. For example, Ustad,
Mm.
if I if I if I'm an avid social media user, we're gonna be done with this video, and MMAC is gonna post it. Then I'm gonna share it on my story. And the first thing I'm gonna think about is not how this benefits my community or how how well choreographed it was. It's gonna be how I spoke, how I looked,
Ooh.
how I talked, and even a good thing such as this can can become bad, and it's not my fault. It's not that I'm innately corrupt that that's the case. It's because this it was designed to be that. And when I realized that, when I realized that uh, no matter there are different levels of fakeness people indulge in social media, and I'm not saying everybody needs to quit like I did, because there are people like wali of Allah, mashallah, they really have their nafs trained and controlled, and they just don't treat it the way I did. But it's just that switch. And it's another big thing. It's realizing that my true friends, I could contact them anywhere else, that they would still be in touch with me through WhatsApp. I had, like most of my friends, I still kept in touch with them, even after I quit social media. So the main thing I missed out on was, however, the the validation. It just takes one word, the validation, the feeling that I'm important, that I have value in the eyes of others, and that is the most powerful thing that social media offers. So, yeah, I feel
I
like
have to ask, Abrar, like, did you notice any changes in like, you know, your friendships after you went on the social media break? Like, did you realize, you know, are who's there for validation, who's there for, you know, actual companionship?
bro, it's great that you ask that, because the biggest change that I noticed was actually that I was grounded in reality. Not the first week. First week I was still thinking about social media, even though I was not in it. But I was more in touch with everything. So if it's not like life was perfect, it's not like it was some sort of epiphany, but I was still in touch with everything that was happening around me. I was more receptive to my environment. I wasn't pissing my whole family off all the time. And about friends, like I've personally always been more of an introvert person, even though I've been sort of when I was doing music, I did play some in some venues and stuff. I was always very particular about who I hung out with. So I didn't notice a big difference in those terms. Like the people I was always in touch with still kept in touch with me.
Mm.
And the people who sort of just followed my content, they drifted away. And it's come to a point now that I've actually deleted them myself, because I don't it's not halal haram. See, it's not about, I can't use that as an excuse. It's more about just understanding myself and knowing what my weaknesses are.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, it's if we just started to slow down. Oh, where's Saber at?
I think let me pause for a second.
Yeah, I was just saying that once you do, we're able to really just deep breath, pause, you know, look at our lives with a reflective eye and just be real, totally real with ourselves. That's when abroad, you realized, okay, you know what? Actually, social media is bad for me. And maybe someone else realizes, you know what? I think I have an addiction to watching movies and not just enjoying them. And that's when someone else realizes, you know what? I don't enjoy sitting with my family. I don't know why, you know? And only then can we start to fix these things. The issue is uh, we're jumping from one thing to the next and we don't know why. So I think developing that reflective eye, that basira, right? That tadabbur, that reflection, everyone can do it, and we need to. We absolutely need to. Otherwise, it's as Ibrahim ibn Adham said, right? He said if the kings knew what we taste, they would want to take our heads off. What does that mean? that means, right, there is a pleasure, a validation, a sense of being known in the nearness to God that you cannot find anywhere else. And here's the reason that we look for it in everything else, right? Because we're lazy to actually find it where we should find it. You know? So Allah help us. But I think there's been a lot of goodness in quarantine, honestly. Besides the fact, I mean, the economical repercussions of this whole thing, Allah help all of us, man. Allah help everyone.
I mean,
Because that's a whole separate podcast. But besides that, from a personal view and from an individual level, a lot of good came and can still come out. Even if you've just been sorry for yourself the last 2 months, you still have the time to really take advantage of this opportunity, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that shit, because I was thinking, considering all like the socio-economic things that are, outcomes of quarantine, I feel as if like we're at a moment where we have the ability to definitely, develop sabr, develop, a connection with the law in case of fitna, because we don't know what type of fitna is to come from this, and we don't know, where this is headed. So we have a time for us to actually, internalize, our struggles, internalize, what we need, and we have time to reflect on more, and not get distracted from other things in the world. It's definitely a more individual time for sure.
Absolutely. One of the things, honestly, I keep saying to myself since this whole thing started, and I'm just going to say it out because I truly believe this. Alhamdulillah for Islam, man.
Alhamdulillah.
Dude, if you don't believe in a hereafter, and you don't believe, right, in God that's in control of everything, I would be running around like a headless chicken, man. I would be scared out of my mind.
You don't know where it's going, it just
and you hear so many things. Oh my God, the dollar will have no value tomorrow. Oh my God, you're gonna get kicked out of your rental home. Oh my God, all the college you paid so much for doesn't matter anymore. And it's like you literally can just get so scared and go into a dark place. But as Muslims, it's like, listen, Allah said, I'm not gonna hold you accountable to what you're not able to do. So I'm gonna focus on what I'm able to do, and I leave everything else to Allah. And if I do that, right, I will find such inner peace, right? But it's an action. You have to do it. Tawakkul, it's part of a verb. Like you have to do it. You can't just think it, talk about it. You do it.
It's like a compass in the darkness.
Oh yeah.
And it's our guide. It's our standard.
Yeah.
And when you don't have a standard, all hell breaks loose. And alhamdulillah for Islam, like you said.
Alhamdulillah, man. Holy moly.
It definitely gives us the bearing. There's every aspect of life. There's an answer to it. There's something that we can do in order to impact it. And there isn't, area for what ifs. There's always an assurance that Islam that offers people.
Absolutely. One of my, subhanAllah, just 2 days ago, one of my teachers passed away in Yemen. He was the mufti of his city, Tarim. He was the mufti of Tarim, Habib Ali al-Mashhur.
I saw the janazah procession of Habib Omar.
Yeah. That was, I mean, that's a whole separate podcast. We're gonna have some reflections on his life tonight. But anyways, the first time I ever met him, I heard him say a dua at the beginning of his talk, and then every talk he ever gives, he says this. And the first couple of times it didn't mean anything to me, and then it really started hitting me. And he would always say, being 80 years old, Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam wa kafa biha min ni'mah. He would say, all praises to Allah for the blessing of Islam, and it's the most sufficient blessing. And I think, again, if you have that eye, that reflective eye, you can think about this, but you'll ultimately come back to this statement. It's the most sufficient blessing.
A beautiful reflection, Ustad. And I wish we could take one whole day, 24 hours, just to talk to you and learn from you. But unfortunately, I think we're near the end of our time.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with MMAC, and I feel like everybody is going to enjoy this podcast so much. Sabri, you've been amazing, bro. Thank you so much. And Ustad, do you have any final reflections, any words to say to the audience?
Any updates on the Tanveer Institute?
Final reflections. Again, if this podcast was jumpy, my bad. I like organic conversation, but if we want to speak about one specific topic in the future, I'm down to do that. As far as Tanweer goes, you can check us out on Facebook, tanweerinstitute.org, and we have a class coming up soon in the summer. You can see that as well, inshallah. So just make dua for us, man.
You said there was a class tonight as well on.
Yeah, we have a weekly Thursday gathering. That is every Thursday after Maghrib. So you can, we're going to post a flyer again on Facebook. You can check it out on Facebook Live or Zoom, inshallah.
Inshallah. And if you guys like more information about the Tanveer Institute, we'll include it in our Instagram. And thank you for listening to the MMAC podcast. And thank you, Sheikh Ustad, for being part of the podcast. And inshallah, the information you gave and the talks, it was definitely beneficial. And inshallah, the people listening will find it beneficial as well.
Is there a theme song?
Oh, we kind of just throw that. Omar figures something out. We just kind of find something, a little closing or something.
Allah bless you all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept and to increase us in love for each other, to increase us in our good bonds for His sake subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah by His bounty and by His mercy that He eliminate this virus from this world and that He bring balance to the world. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He accept from us. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Salaam alaikum.